Peace Talks. This is the series of interviews where we catch up with the musicians that are coming to play for us at the Marr's Bar in Worcester. And today I'm joined by Eddie Gripper. Hi, Eddie.
Hey Dave, it's great to be here.
Eddie's just released last year his debut album on Ubuntu Records, Home, and he'll be kicking off the 2024 leg of his tour, the album tour, at the Marr's Bar in Worcester on Thursday, the 25th of January. So, yeah, welcome, Eddie, and thanks for joining us today. What I'd like to start with, if we could just sort of dig a little bit into your own sort of musical history, kind of how you got to where you are today, because I believe you started on trumpet, didn't you? You're playing piano now, obviously. So, yeah, do you want to sort of start off with a little bit of that background?
Yeah, you're quite right. I started learning trumpet when I was about 6 or 7. It was cornet at the time. Obviously, it's such a long instrument; it's too big to get my hands around it when you're that kind of age. Um, but I played that all through primary school, and it became my principal instrument in secondary school, and that's what I spent most of my time studying. And in school orchestras and school ensembles and that kind of thing. I was always playing trumpet. But when I was about 11 or 12, I decided that I really liked to learn how to play the piano. Um, and I guess my dad plays the piano as well,
Okay.
so maybe that's a little bit of a rub off there, but I'm not entirely sure where that came from. But the thing that the piano gave me, which the trumpet didn't, was obviously harmony or
Right.
polyphony, being able to play more than one voice at a time or to accompany yourself. And I was adamant I didn't want to study grades. I just wanted to do it for fun.
Cool.
Um, which, as a teacher now of piano, is always a little bit of a scary prospect. But it's great to have that structure in one instrument, and then it was great to have a little bit more freedom with
Yeah.
the other. And I played a little bit of piano throughout school and everything, but I left school after studying A levels and started studying music at Cardiff University. And I joined as a trumpet player, classical
Hmm.
trumpet player, and within the first year, I kind of realised it just really wasn't for me, unfortunately. But what I had learned to do at the time on the piano was improvise, and I'd done a little bit of that throughout school as well. I suddenly realised that if you type in the name of a song into Google and type chords after it, you could very quickly find your way around a tune without having to spend weeks learning the intricacies of sheet music. So
Right.
I
Okay.
had
Yeah.
that kind of intuition, but in terms of following that on it at university or moving to Cardiff, the natural conduit for that was jazz, and there's quite a big scene for it here in Cardiff with the conservatoire across the road from the university. So I started studying jazz piano the during my second year of university with Hugh Warren, and that's kind of where it all started, to be honest.
Ah, okay. Yeah. He's great. Yeah. We had him down in November. He was playing in Corey Dick's Sunny
With
Swells
Corey,
band.
yes,
Yeah. That
yeah,
was
yeah,
great.
yeah. Yeah, Hugh's wicked. He's an amazing player and such a huge influence in mine and my bandmates' lives as well. As I'm sure most musicians who hail from Cardiff will also say the same thing, and further afield, obviously, as well. But yeah, all three of us in the band have all experienced the great tutelage of Hugh Warren.
Brilliant. So, yeah, I'd like to kind of explore this sort of education aspect as well, because for those that have been following our series here, you're actually the first musician that I've interviewed that was born this century. It's only
Which is
we're
crazy.
only 24 years in now, so it's as grand as it sounds. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to get your insight because there's a lot of talk, I think, at the moment, certainly over the last couple of years, about the decline in music education at sort of primary and secondary school level, and just it'd be just good to get your kind of insight on where you feel, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Is there directions that it's going in? Yeah, just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting, really. I grew up in Oxfordshire, which is a very affluent part of the world, which I'm very, very appreciative of and thankful for. And there's always a lot of opportunity in school, and there was always funding and money for the arts. And my school, Burford, was always within the district at the forefront of that. Um, so I was very lucky to have all that. Um, but I've learned a lot from about music education, having also been a teacher for the
Yeah,
last couple of years as well, teaching peripatetically because I live in Cardiff, and some of the schools I've taught in and around Cardiff, in the valleys or otherwise, the experience there is something completely different to what I had growing up. Which makes me even more grateful
right.
for what I had. But I've been a part of a lot of council-funded initiatives, teaching in, areas that really need the education, or particularly children that don't or wouldn't have access to it because of financial reasons.
Mm,
And it's amazing what education, music education, provides for children because you know teaching in primary schools, which I have, I've never been Mr. Gripper. I've always been Eddie, and 15 minutes a week for these kids is just huge. They feel like that it's a breath of fresh air, and it really helps with their confidence and their cognitive ability and all these things as well. And there's a lot that can be said for music education in the general development. The influence it has on the general development of children.
mm,
Unfortunately, a lot of those council-funded initiatives have been cut now in Wales, and I actually don't teach in schools anymore. I teach entirely privately, but it was a huge learning experience for me, and I'm a huge advocate for, the continued funding of the arts here in Wales and also across the UK. Um, but yeah, it's a shame because you know, even being at university, you can see that there is still quite a large misrepresentation of culture
right.
and ethnicity, and the problem we have in music is that it is kind of it is institutionalized in a way, and you know you can put a lot of money into council initiatives at a young age to get people to learn an instrument and to support them through that. But unfortunately, it's the shortfall of most of these programs is that there isn't a long term vision. As soon as the
Right.
money runs out, as soon as the funding ends, what do the kids do? Well, they go straight back to not being able to afford these things, and that's reflected in the cohorts you kind of get at a university level. And there's a lot being done at university and institutional level to try and right some of these things by, particularly at Cardiff, shining light on, music from different cultures
Mhm.
and diversity in terms of gender as well, so studying music and focusing on music by female composers. But you know, that in itself, in my opinion, isn't enough to really address the issue at the core. And the problem is, it's a really difficult question. It hasn't got a difficult answer either. But particularly in our economic climate here in the UK, I think that the arts are being sidelined more than they ever have been before, which is a real shame. So the future of that, I don't really know what to see or what to
Yeah.
expect. I'll keep on going on saying what I say and feeling how I feel, but it's really difficult to come up with any real solution to these problems.
Yeah, I get the feeling that it's more important now. I think it's probably going to be down to sort of more smaller community projects that you've got. It seems I don't know. It seems nationally there's a sort of a sort of bigger challenge, as you say, sort of funding from central government and such like that. So it feels like it's more sort of community based projects. I mean, Tomorrow's Warriors is a fantastic example of how successful that can be. I think that's a great organisation. I think Yeah, I hope to think that the future is kind of more along those sort of lines of organisations like that. Um,
Mm.
that are kind of sort of more community based. Obviously, that's very much sort of London centric. Um, yeah, and um, I guess as well as that's the other thing. As soon as you start getting away from the bigger cities, those a lot of those opportunities sort of and those kind of community based things tend to be fewer and further between.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think music has always been most effective at the community level,
Mm,
and just because of the nature of like of the music education system at the moment, that is the way that it will continue to thrive, is through communities coming together and supporting one another, which is, what we all need in and outside of music, at this moment in time. Um, so yeah.
cool. And sort of carrying that on, so your debut album released last year, Home. Um, what's it like as a graduating musician emerging into the world of professional music these days, especially in the jazz arena as well, which is quite a niche area.
Um, well, it's not easy. It's quite a challenge. I think now, in 2024, when I started out my career as a working musician freelance, that was in 2021. So I've had a couple of years experience now. I feel like I've learned a lot, but I still feel like I've got so much more I need to learn on the
Mm,
bandstand, or just generally about how to operate a business, or how
yeah,
to kind of how to work. But yeah, it's challenging because in 2024, because of you know the huge technological overhaul we've had over the last 25 years or so, there's so much noise,
yeah,
and the most challenging thing is just trying to get your voice heard over all that. Um, you know, and for me, the biggest thing has been the biggest help has been, signing with Ubuntu and having a great label behind me, and the support of Martin, um, over there. Um, but yeah, it's super challenging, and also the thing that I struggled with as well was coming straight out of COVID.
yeah.
Um, my kind of years in the shed, I guess, when I was at uni, were all behind closed doors. I was playing with a handful of musicians, and we were playing like every day, every week for like 18 months, in isolation in COVID and whatever. And that's the band that I'm playing with at the Mars Bar,
Right.
Patrick and Ursula, huge, super duper long time collaborators, great friends of mine. And us, along with a few others, we didn't really have that exposure to playing with other people,
Right.
or like the exposure to gigging. So coming out of COVID, coming out of my degree, and trying to land on my feet in 2021 was super challenging, because I had like literally no experience of dealing with people, no experience with working, no experience with really gigging properly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a huge challenge as well, and all in that, trying to like make money from gigging and trying to build up my teaching portfolio and try and get some experience doing that as well. It was a challenge for a while, and for a year or so it was a bit of a struggle, but kind of managed to get it together. And then in the second year, I decided I wanted to record this album. And then, within the last year or so, that's when everything's happened with my record deal and the tour that's come together. And I'm very fortunate to have experienced lots of great publicity surrounding my music. So I feel very grateful for that. But it's been one hell of a ride. It really has.
That's good. Yeah, it is difficult, and I think the point you made before is the fact there is so much noise, um, and I think it's quite interesting when you look at with technology and the stuff that you've got, the capabilities you've got even on your phone these days to put something together and actually then to get it out into the world. If you think about, I when I started playing bass, it's 30 years ago. It was cassette tape, 4-track cassette tape recorders that you had, and the only distribution mechanism you had was with your tape to tape copier to hand it out to your mates in the pub sort of thing. And so the sort of the platforms that we've got now to that kind of enable the creation of music, and I think in some ways that's lost a lot of the band playing together, a group of musicians coming together in a room to each put their own bit of what they do into a piece of music or into a song. Um, you know, there's a lot of sort of the one man band sort of thing. You know, there's the person who's putting everything together on their own in isolation without a lot of that other influence and sort of input from other players that I think is quite predominant in
Yeah,
in sort
totally.
of
And I think
music
as well,
scene.
like the overhaul of all that, you know, the huge technological overhaul we're talking about. Along with that, we've kind of lost a little bit of the idea of albums and
Yeah,
the actual ins and outs of how music it still operates in some way today. But I'm mainly talking about streaming,
yeah,
right? The big the big topic of streaming, which is singularly like the best and worst thing to ever happen to music. Um, you know, it's great that music has been so democratized and that it's so freely available for you to find music and find your niche as a listener, but also as an artist to be able to put it out there. Um, but also, you know, the idea of recording an album and putting that out, and that mixed in now with playlisting, where people will take your tracks and put them in their playlist, take them out of the context.
yeah,
And I don't know, I'm a culprit of someone who has not listened to albums only in the last couple of years to actually finally sit down and actually start listening to albums as they're intended. And I find the narrative is so much more compelling than if you were to take little tracks out here and there
mm,
and things like that. So there's a huge difference there as well. And you know the whole industry feels like it's almost against you when you're talking about streaming as an artist anyway, because obviously the revenue is so marginal.
yeah, yeah,
And also if we're using like playlisting as an example, my understanding of how it works is that, you know, if you wanted to be playlisted on Spotify or Apple Music or something like that, they need to know what followership you have on social media, and that's not because they want to support you
yeah. It's
in
because I
growing
want to
your
make
fan
sure.
base. It's because they want to make sure that you're bringing people to their
Exactly.
playlist,
Yeah,
which seems totally wrong. It
it
seems
is.
such a noble thing, but it's actually not. It's the complete opposite way round. So
Yeah.
that can be a little bit, you know, disenfranchising at times. But
Mm,
that's why it's so important to keep playing live and to tour and to make
exactly.
those
Yeah.
connections.
And I think I've had a couple of conversations and heard other people in other settings come up with a similar sort of analysis of where things are going with AI as well and sort of AI produced music. Because I would say that sort of 80% of music these days is just listened to as background stuff. And you know, it's the radio on while you're doing the washing up, or it's the you know, while you're working at, you know, building a wall or whatever it is you do outside or whatever, you got the radio on. And that sort of background music, um, which you don't really pay attention to and could quite easily be generated by a machine reproducing that kind of sound. And but the problem with that is that it all becomes very very similar. um
Mm,
and I think that because of the way that the music industry has sort of really been almost taken over by the technology, and the people that are in you know, the organizations that are in control are the tech platforms that are running it. And they have the ability effectively within their own technology to sort of reproduce that or create new, if you want to call it that. But I believe that if you know if that does actually sort of start to run its course, then the live music then becomes so much more valuable, because it's you know, with anything that becomes more rare, it becomes more valuable, and that real connection in a room, with a live audience, you know, for the musicians and everything else is what's really what's really that's what the music is all about, isn't it? If you go back to
Yeah,
sort of yeah, decades, centuries before, before there was recording, that was the only way to kind of hear music. So it's
absolutely. And I think that the audience is always that extra person in the band as well. That's how I always think of it as well. Like as a trio, the audience is always going to be the fourth member of the band because, particularly in
okay.
jazz, but all music as well, it's like, you always feed off that energy.
Mm,
And that's also the challenge of being in the studio as well, because you don't have that energy or that vibe to kind of play off. But
yeah.
that's something that's really special that AI hasn't quite caught up with yet.
Yeah,
We'll
I
have
don't
to
think
wait
it.
and see, but
Yeah, I don't
I
think
don't
it will
know.
ever get there. I think there's a it makes sense that it could produce popular music, which in itself is very much not algorithm driven, but even if you look at the like the 80s, Stock Aitken and Waterman, as the hits
Mm,
factory, it was every song sounding the same because formulaic is what I was what I was thinking of, so it's and that's always, that's just the way commercial things work. You have a formula, it works until it stops working, and then you try something else. But yeah, I think that the live aspect is definitely something that well, that's what Music Spoken Here is all about as well. Is it's about
yeah, absolutely.
reconnecting with live music, but in a with genres and such that a lot of people aren't really familiar with. So try something new and see
Yeah,
where it
totally.
goes. Ah,
Yeah.
no, that's cool. So yeah, the album there on Ubuntu. Tell us a little bit about the composing on that and kind of what's because I know a lot of the pieces on there are kind of sort of personal stories and such like that. So yeah, do you want to touch on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, Dave, you were fortunate enough to be at my album launch in London.
Indeed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you've heard some of these stories before, but yeah, I love telling these stories. It adds a little bit of depth to the tunes. Anyway, when I'm playing live. But just to give you a little taste, all this music was written during the pandemic,
Hmm.
um, and up to June 2022, which is when we recorded the album. And it was interesting because during this period of my life, there's a lot of change going on. Obviously, you have the pandemic, and I never really written music before. I'd written bits and pieces here and there, but it was only during the pandemic that I really start to get stuck into it. Um, and it was only during the latter half of the pandemic that I started to write music that was kind of envisioned to be playing in a trio as like a jazz kind of setting with improvisation. Before that, I was kind of writing songs with friends with
Yeah.
lyrics and not much improvisation going on. But each of these tunes marks like a significant kind of point in my life. They kind of just happened. It was more like I was writing, but kind of subconsciously reflecting my own personal experience at the time, which ultimately culminated in my response to the unfortunate kind of passing of my grandparents, who I lost both within a year of
Right.
each other, which they were a huge influence in my life. Loved them very, very dearly, and they put a lot of money up for my music education. So I feel like I owe them a lot
Hmm.
in that regard. And so the final tune on my album, To the Moon, is in memory of my grandmother. There's another tune on my album called Mum's Best Friend, which is dedicated to my family cat, who unfortunately had to be put down in 2022. And yeah, that was an interesting one because my mum's best friend, my mum, lives alone. I'm her only child, and as my mum's best friend, it was a huge, devastating loss to her and to me, obviously.
Right.
But the cat had been a part of our family
Hmm. Yeah.
for longer, the majority of my life, and when things like that, they feel like the furniture, and then it's all material at the end of the day, and unfortunately things come and go, and despite being a family pet passing, it really had a huge impact on me because I thought, I'm here in Cardiff, my family is still back in Oxfordshire, and that life is still going on as mine is here. It's not the same. I'm not going to go back and pick it up from where it left off. Things are always moving. So really, the whole album, the theme is kind of it's about maturity. Really, I feel like I'm very much I have the opinion that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I feel like I've
Indeed.
kind of grown through all these personal experiences, and it's great that I feel like I've got something to say musically out of it, but I feel very much at ease sharing these personal stories with audiences because I'm quite an introspective and private person, but kind of music empowers me to kind
Mm,
of
right.
share these things, you know.
Yeah.
And fortunately, a lot of people share similar, sentiments that I'll talk about the passing of loved ones or maturity or changes or things like that. So it's always great chatting to people after these shows about their own experiences, and yeah, it's like what we were saying earlier. It's very much jazz is very much a people's kind of music, and it's all about telling these stories and
Yeah.
meeting new people and sharing these experiences.
Fantastic. Well, it's anyone who wants to come down and share some of those stories, certainly come down on Thursday, and you can chat to Eddie and the band. So it's Ursula Harrison on bass and Barrett-Donlon on drums.
Correct.
Yeah, do come on down on Thursday for that at the Mars Bar. Thanks very much for your time with us today, Eddie. That's been really enlightening, and really looking forward to catching up with you on Thursday and hearing your fantastic evening of great entertainment for us.
Thanks, Dave. Looking
Thanks
forward
very
to it.
much.